Welcome, Ben, Kane, and Elizabeth Oldfield. That was too much of an introduction, but nonetheless, on behalf of Second Pres and Christ Episcopal and the Cal system, we are delighted to be here. I am. To be up here with an amazing author and a really just wonderful person. And the best part about her is her book is incredible. What she has to say is amazing, and she has a British accent. And I want to share a little bit about her that I learned from her biography, but also got to know in the back, in the green room, as they call it. And she is a writer, she's a podcaster, she's a former director of Theos, which is a think tank in the UK. She is also a spouse, a wife, and a mother, and she lives in an intentional community, which we will be asking about, because that is blowing my mind still, as she lives with people other than the people she chose to marry and birth, as well as the writer of this wonderful book called Fully Alive. And I want to start, first of all, by saying thank you for coming to America and coming to Little Rock. And I had one question. I didn't ask you this in the back, but I want to know, did you know where Arkansas was before we reached out to you? All right, we'll go with that. She's honest. All right, this is the way I wanted to start. You wrote, and we talked about this back in the back, in the early part of your introduction, that this book is about your search for a deep life. For a place to steady yourself amidst the waves. Partly it's vanity. I want to be luminous. I want a luminous soul, which I appreciate your honesty there. I'm done with cool. Well, that's not quite true. I want to be done with cool. I'm old enough, surely. It is true that I am increasingly drawn to wisdom. So you wrote those words. You came up with this idea to write a book about sin. Some publisher said, yes, run with it. You have published this book. Tell us about the process of going from this idea of I want to write about sin, writing about sin, and now the book is out. How has it unfolded? And are the responses what you expected?
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. What a joy to get, libraries are the best place, well, aren't they? So what a joy to get to be at least library adjacent in this wonderful city. In the birth pains of the library again, I guess as well. Yes, so I'm 41. I was the classic, bookish child who always thought I'd be a writer when I grew up, and like a lot of us, lost the confidence to even attempt that as I went out into the world and realised the kind of people who were writers were not people like me. And then throughout my 30s, this sense I had of just increasing yearning and longing for depth and roots and wisdom. And I think it's partly just aging, right? You learn more about the world, you suffer, you struggle, but it's also about the times that we're living in. Right, the stories that were told about the future, the coping mechanisms of the past generations just at least appear to be beginning to crumble. And so I have this sense of I need wisdom for myself. I need to know if there's anything in this strange tradition that I found myself back in somewhat reluctantly. And I have this increasing sense that everything is about relationships, and this concept of sin, which has been so misused and so misunderstood and hurt so many people, or now just used like a joke, right? Calories and cream cakes and naughtiness, could be something like deeply psychologically bracing and realistic about the human condition that had something to teach us in these times. But I also knew I wanted not to write a book for Christians. I wanted to write about sin in ways that made sense to the majority of my friends who would never go looking in the box labeled theology for wisdom, who, again, had pretty good reason to think that was done, that was in the past, that there wasn't a place for them there. And so all in all, trying to write a book about sin, not for Christians, just was like, guess I'm going to write this for myself then. And I fully expected, as I was writing it, that no one would read it because it would be too sweary and honest and frank about sex and frank about doubt and confused for Christians. that it is not, and I just wouldn't know how to write it in the tone that most books by pastors and theologians are written, which are often wonderful, but often also quite careful, worried about getting things wrong, with a lot of personality. It's like, no. Most. So I didn't think Christians would read it, and the idea of writing a book about sin and theology for those outside the church also sounded like madness. But as it turns out, we're all humans.
Yep.
And we're all longing, and frankly, my generation and Dan will take wisdom wherever they can get it. And at least in the UK, that generation have less baggage about Christianity than their parents did, are getting interested again. And so I realised one week that this strange project that I thought would go nowhere, this strange book that no one would read, had been featured on the Goop podcast, which the women in the room will have heard of, because it's Gwyneth Paltrow's Weird Wellness podcast, on the Ezra Klein show, which has a different audience than the Goop podcast, and had been reviewed really, really kindly in the Gospel Coalition, which is a kind of more conservative Christian outlet, and that they had all seen something in it that they thought was fruitful and life-giving. And I nearly fell off my chair, and I feel incredibly grateful.
Wow, that's incredible. Can you share a little bit for the crowd that hasn't had a chance to dig all the way into your book about, you talked a little bit about you came back to the Christian faith. And something that I think is fascinating and does not make sense to me, but that doesn't matter, is that you are charismatic, but also an Anglican. Those don't normally go together. Not in a bad way. I'm not trying to... Same with charismatic Presbyterian, that's sort of an oxymoron. So can you share a little bit about your faith journey?
I'm sure we can sort that out right now. Well, the first thing I want to say is, if you're in this room and you would not call yourself Christian, and someone has dragged you here, or you've come via one of those other routes, I'm so happy you're here, and this is not a book that is like has some like bait and switch thing going on. I really think there is wisdom and like insight into the human condition and goodness and beauty and truth in these 2,000 years of reflection, even if for you church is not some place that you want to go again or would ever go. So like, thank you for coming tonight, and I really want to make that clear. The second thing to say is Americans are you're so delightful with your boxes. I don't know if it's just the church in the UK, there's been so few of us that you sort of have to get along, and no one's that bothered about the labels. But whenever I come here, people are like, how do I triangulate you? And you do it politically as well. How can I track exactly where you are on this compass in relation to me? Straight in there with the big issues. I don't know. I don't know how to fit in on that. Yeah, just to say, like, the labels, I use the word, none of the labels quite translate. So if you come across a label in the book that you're like, ooh, I don't like those guys, is she one of those guys? One, read the Roth chapter. And two, like, that things don't quite translate. But yes, I grew up with very mild background cultural Methodism, like occasional trips to a very dying and aging Methodist church, which were not attractive to me at that age. The Methodist tradition obviously is like raw, beautiful and wonderful in its history, but that was not my encounter with it. And then I was taken to a charismatic Anglican evangelical youth festival, and was a kind of questioning kid, and assumed that none of it was for me, and I thought, I'm going to run this little scientific experiment in this room full of loonies who are praying in tongues and falling over. And I prayed, God, if you were there, would you show me? Wow. And God did. And then I was a Christian in a very earnest, happy, lovely, really enjoyable. I have to say, that is such an enjoyable place to be. It's just so safe and cozy and simple and straightforward. But then I got a job at the BBC, and I was working on a program about the Bible.
Not warm and cozy, is that what you're saying?
No, the BBC is it's got its failings, but I'm glad it exists. But I ended up working on a program about the Bible and realised I'd never really read it. I just read the bridge magnet bits. And I had what is now labelled a deconstruction. We didn't have branding at the time. It's had a glow up since then. It was just like a crisis of faith. Dark night of the soul. And I tried to be an atheist for a while, but I was really bad at it. Can't do it. And so I found my way. I looked in a lot of other places actually, but kind of slowly, grumpily, reluctantly concluded that one, I could not seem to shake God off. God was not leaving me alone. And two, that there was a wider, deeper, spikier, actually more complex and rich thing going on in this tradition that had stuff to say to me and maybe to other people in these times.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, the question we were discussing in the back, what was the hardest of the sins to write about? Although I just want to acknowledge writing a whole book is incredibly hard, so thank you for doing it and sitting down and doing that. But nonetheless, what was the hardest to write for you?
Do you mind if I just say a little bit what I mean by sin?
Yes.
Oh, I won't then. I'm going to say what I mean by sin. We're so polite. Do you mind? Can I please have? I've got the mic. I'm going to say what I mean by sin. And I am, because it's a very loaded word, right? You may have history with this word. And I draw, one of my chapters is titled after, and I won't, because one, we're American, two are in the South, and the American version of the book is bleeped out, but the British version isn't. But there's a writer called Francis Buffett, and his definition of sin is the human propensity to F things up. And I really like that. It was like the beginning of me coming back to the value of this concept. We're like, yeah, that sounds about right. In my life, in other people's lives. And my kind of growing understanding of a vision of the human that is grounded in my tradition, but I think you see lots of other disciplines coming to, is of irreconcilably relational. That we've been told we're these atomized individuals going about the world self-actualizing and rationally choosing things and writing our own stories, and it's bull. It is that we are made, I think, by God and for God, that my vision of God is a relational God, a Trinitarian anthropology is the fancy word, but we're also made by each other and for each other. And that when we're living in deep relationship with our own soul, and if the language soul trips you up, you can use your deep self, with your own deep self and what it really wants, which is often not the crazy surface level stuff that's useful for the economy. Relationship with other people, real relationship, seeing and being seen, knowing and being known as we are. And yes, deep relationship and encounter with capital L love. That's fully alive. That's what I mean by lifefulness. But that's hard, right? That's not how we live. That's not how I live. There is this opposite instinct in us that is about fracture and about breaking of those relationship connections. That's what Buffett means. The human propensity to F things up, the human propensity to break those relationships, to numb or distract, withdraw. Luther and Augustine use this phrase, homo incubatus in se, which I like saying because it makes it sound like I know Latin, I don't know Latin. And the translation is man, or I prefer humanity turned in on itself, like an ingrowing toenail. That we are made for life, we are made for relationship, we are designed to grow upwards and outwards into fullness of life, into relationship, and instead we pull back into ourselves like an ingrowing toenail. That's like soul pus. That's what sin gives you, soul pus. That's the image that I have in my head. And so that's what I mean by sin, and I want you to know that because otherwise you might be hearing something I don't mean by it. Like you might have been beaten with it, like a kosh. You might carry some bruises from it. And the hardest one to write about, thank you for your patience, was avarice. which greed is the kind of common translation, but I also have a chapter on gluttony, and I think they're two slightly different things. Avarice, man, wow. Oh.
Can you say what avarice is to Americans who may not have read the book?
Yeah.
This is a transition conversation.
Yeah. So avarice is the accumulation of money and stuff more than we need. More than we need, right? And need, as it turns out, is a very expansionist concept. And the reason I think it's related to this fullness of life is if we're designed for interdependence, if we're designed to be relationally in these communities of mutual care, then what we're doing when we accumulate more money and stuff than we need is resisting that interdependence. We don't want to need other people, we don't want to have to ask for things from other people, we don't want to have to share things with other people, so it's much easier just everyone on the street to have a lawnmower and a hedge trimmer and a drill and a pool and whatever it is. Even though they are only used very rarely, and you probably only need one more per street, the relational interactions and trust and conversations required to make sure that drill gets to everywhere it needs to be on the street, where it needs to go, and risk annoying somebody is too much, so we all own one. Right? That's just like a tiny little version. And also, for a Christian, if we are trusting that we are made by and for God, that we will have enough. We might not have everything we want that makes us look great on Instagram, but we will have enough. Then that accumulation of stuff is also about fear, right? It's about resisting. And I say all these things, and it's making me tense to say them because I feel so convicted that I think the Christian tradition is this is where I start sounding super evangelical, and I don't mean that's a bad thing. The Bible is incredibly challenging. The New Testament, Jesus, we've got to go, we can't dodge it. It's like saying this is a fringe thing. This is not a peripheral thing. Jesus says some things about money and the accumulation of wealth that I can barely bring myself to read. Right? I'm like, really though? I'm going to go to the last bits again. I'm back to my fridge magnet verses that make me feel cozy. Jesus doesn't make me feel cozy anymore. Like, the Bible doesn't make me feel cozy anymore. It makes me feel challenged. And the deepest challenge is about the way my desire to be an independent individual who doesn't need God or other people shows up in me hoarding money and things. And I say that as someone who bought 5 different types of facial sun cream in my carry-on package.
You're really big on serums, aren't you?
I love a serum!
Alright, let's dig in. This is from the chapter on avarice, where you said, Oliver James, acknowledged that religious ideas and practice are one of the things capable of inoculating someone against affluenza, with a capital A, because they repeatedly, quote, encourage satisfaction with what people already possess. Alright, unpack that with us as a challenge. As you're writing this chapter, and I don't disagree with you one bit in your assessment of the difficulty with which reading the New Testament, especially when Jesus calls us out for all the things that we have too much of. And we were discussing back there the rich young ruler who is asked to give up everything and goes away grieving, and Jesus cries as well. Unpack that and tell us more about the ways in which the church or religious practices or religious ideas, because you were right that there might be some folks here who don't attend church but they're here and they want to know a little bit more.
Yeah, so Oliver James, and he wrote this book called Affluenza, and it was about the paradox that often the wealthier population or a country gets, the more miserable they are. And he's not Christian, doesn't have any religious influence as far as I know, but he seemed to be circling around this thing, that wealth looks seductive because we think it will make us safe, but what it does, it makes us lonely. And a bit like No, I'll come back to this. But so it surprised me when I was reading this book that he was like, how do we get rid of affluenza? And he's not like forcibly redistribute via politics. He's trying to help the reader go, do you really want the things that you think you want? Like, what is the need you are trying to sate in this drive to earn more money, to get a bigger savings account, to get a bigger pension, to go on nice holidays, to buy more serums, whatever your point is. And I always prick up when I notice people who are not steeped in the Christian tradition pointing something out about my tradition that I didn't really notice. And what he said was, and he's talking about religious practice more generally actually, he said one of the bits of the DNA of most religious practice is rituals of gratitude, is the call to notice what you have and say thank you. And there's all this interesting neuroscience which is kind of in the background about this, about attention, like the way attention works, the way what we choose to look at and listen to and think about regularly literally shapes our brain chemistry. It is the determinant of who we are becoming. And so the religious practices that encourage us to regularly say thank you are doing the same thing to us neurologically as the now very popular sort of secular practice of gratitude journaling, right? Which has huge evidence base around it. And all it's doing is it's forcing you to notice what you already have. The strangeness of, and they call it the hedonic treadmill, the strangeness that when we, because we're very wired for novelty, when we acquire something, we get a little hit of dopamine, we might feel a bit good about it, and then it becomes invisible to us. That becomes the norm, right? Like, I'm in my 40s, I really like nice sheets, really good bed linens. When I was in my 20s, I don't care, I can sleep on polyester, because I've never really slept on Egyptian cotton. But now, if I have to get into a polyester bed sheets, I'm like, ugh! How will I survive? And that's the hedonic treadmill, right? What used to seem like a luxury becomes a norm. And so what the gratitude practice does, it makes you look again at the things you already have that have become invisible to you through familiarity. And it is any practice that's collective and repeated tends to be most powerful. And gratitude journaling, if you manage to make the habit, it's really powerful for you. But otherwise it's just you in a journal and you forget and it doesn't really happen. But if you go to church or you go to a different type of worshipping community, there's scaffolding for you. You don't have to remember, someone's going to remind you, right? Or if you pick up your devotional, or whatever it is, like, it is like scaffolding for our attention. It's a way of continually going, look at what you have, look what's in your hands, say thank you. Don't forget, you didn't used to have this, or someone else doesn't have this. Stop craving what you don't have and notice what you have. And it's just really, really good for the soul.
Okay, this leads, I think, into your conversation about acedia, moving from distraction to attention, which, as you probably, as we read the book collectively with Christ and Second Pres and cows, we often found that we were talking about one of the 7 deadly sins as sort of a way to talk about it, but there were always that tangential, I know you don't like boxes the way Americans like boxes, but we were sort of moving into the other boxes because sometimes they're all just messed up together,
yes.
Let's just be honest.
Break boxes.
So under the acedia chapter, I want to hear more about the way in which you were talking about the way you were just going there, where the church offers the scaffolding. And you write, I react badly to the idea of a schedule, but a rhythm sounds inviting. Say more about that.
Yeah, so acedia is the Latin word that often gets translated sloth. But there's a bit like you can't really translate shalom directly into peace. There's more going on in the word. In acedia, there's more going on. It's a kind of like, the thing I get to is distraction from what's important. And it feels endemic. And I have come to the conclusion that if I want to find steadiness of soul, if I want to be becoming the kind of person the world needs, what I am regularly paying attention to is what I will become. And so I suddenly could see regular and again collective religious practice. And I'm tripping over the word because it's got so many negative associations. But let's just say I want to be religious and spiritual. And one way of thinking about it is spiritual is something you can do on your own. Religious is something you have to do together. And and regular collective religious practice, that you don't have to rely on your willpower or your busyness. You've got other people around you, because we are independent creatures who need each other, who are designed to be together. Is actually, I like the word trellis. I think I like biological metaphors more than machine ones. So scaffolding or trellis, it helps me train the plant of my life, the plant of my attention in the direction that I want to go, rather than just reacting to all the stimuli, right? Turning my attention towards whoever's got the biggest billboard, or the best Instagram reel, or the loudest voice, or the most dominant personality, whatever it is. I can go, who do I want to be becoming? And what are the practices and rituals, because rituals are just like attention training technology, that I can commit to in order to be growing in that direction. And so we really don't like schedule, because I react to too many rules. But I do like rhythm, and that sense that I need a rhythm in my life to keep bringing me back to the things that I want to be formed by. That I need a rhythm in my life to help me keep putting my roots down deep into the soil that's actually nourishing, not into all the other stuff, which we could all name in our own lives.
Would you look back at your own life and see, so you have the experience at the charismatic evangelical retreats, then you moved away from that for various reasons, attempted to become an atheist, is that accurate? Do you think that the church and God, let me take that back, that God brought you back through, you couldn't get away from the rhythms, the routines, the rituals, the liturgy? Is that what drew you back?
No, not initially. I was just deeply existentially lonely. So I have very dear atheist friends, and you might be an atheist staying in the audience, and thank you again for coming. I had known capital L love, and then had attempted to excise that relationship from my life, and there's an author, novelist called Julian Barnes, and the first line of his biography is, "I don't believe in God, but I miss him." And I was trying not to believe in God, but I really missed him. So it was that. And it was also the fact that I'd be like, for whatever reason, I cycle a lot, I bike ride a lot, and I was living in Manchester, it rains a lot, and I was cycling around in the midst of this existential crisis. And I'd be like, I don't believe in you! I don't believe in God! And it was like my spirit was carrying on a conversation that my mind was trying to suppress. And it was just like, stop it! Stop praying in tongues, you stupid internal voice! I sound bad. So yeah, honestly, it was that. The whatever it was that I encountered in that moment when I first encountered. This is the language of course, but there's a chapter called the G-bomb where I'm like, the language here is very, this is all beyond language, and so as a writer that's really annoying. It's like, I can't really care, but you can gesture towards it. But then it also was, yes, I was like, oh, what replaces church, right? Where do I go to be with people and sing? Where do I go to cry every week? Because I'm a big weeper. Like, where do I go to process my emotions with liturgy and ritual and with other people? Like, where do I go for someone to tell me that I'm not actually that great a person and me be able to hear it and go, yeah, no, right, I really should go apologize to them. Like, where there's all these things that healthy congregations and healthy church, and we really need to acknowledge that that's not true of everywhere, or of every church in every season. But like messy and human and failing and fallible, but broadly functional human congregation, which is the best you're going to get, let me tell you. Sorry. There are all these, even in the periods where I was really trying to get out, I was like, the way I would have said it was, there are all these psychological functions that church is providing that I can't find anywhere else. And then I became the director of a religion think tank later. I was like, oh, and there's also all these sociological functions that church is providing that you can't get anywhere else. There's this so I won't go, but that was the bit that I was like, I don't think I'm made for this individualized life of making my own meaning. I don't know if I even believe that's possible, and I certainly don't seem to have the capacity for it.
Thank you for sharing that story. That is, wow. Okay, you have a bunch of church folks here. There are maybe folks who don't attend church. You're sitting across from a pastor, and I know there's other pastors out there. How are we as churches, as you explain and share your story, talk to us as church folks, members, church leaders, pastors, rectors, how do we make space for people like you who are looking for the church, but we can't go out and say, look, what you're actually looking for is us. We're the best. Move to America, join us, all will be well. How do we, and I know that's a loaded question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
No, it's a great question. It's a question I'm very interested in. The word evangelist has like Billy Graham associations, or like much worse than that, right? Well, you know, I've got no beef with Billy.
No, Billy's great. No.
But I am, like, having been out and found my way back in, like, I'm a big Jesus fan girl. I really do like talking to people about Jesus. And what's weird is I find it really easy. Like, there's something about the moment in the UK at the moment, we can talk more a bit if you like, but I think the process of having like had faith and then lost it and then come back in, and also because I am like probably by just demographics but also by choice living, like I worked at the BBC, I worked in Westminster. We live in essentially a commune in South London, which is which is surrounded by like art students and anarchists, and all my friends are writers. I mean, this like disgusting metropolitan elite. You may have just completely stopped liking me. I'm sorry. Jesus loves the metropolitan elite too. Wow, sorry. It's really embarrassing. I have had to. I have never been in a Christian bubble. Right? So when I encounter like most of the people I talk to don't believe what I believe, and so it feels very that's not threatening. That feels very normal. And I think also because I've done this whole like coming back round to it, I feel so relaxed about it. I feel so undefensive and undefended about the beauty and the truth of this thing, and I just trust that the Spirit is at work in the world and there's an adventure to be had. And so, one I would say, like, be amongst people and be relaxed. Don't be tense, don't feel like it's your job, you don't have to stick a flag in them. But then just listen. Like, listen, and it's all in the book. Like, love your neighbours, seek to serve them. And I think in this moment in particular, listening is one of the most radical forms of neighbour love. Like, we have been taught, both in some parts of the church and I think in the political arena, that our job in these times is to tell other people why they're wrong. That's not neighbour love, my friends. That's not neighbour love, and there is stacks of social psychology which will tell you why it's pointless and will probably make the problem worse. Like, we can talk about that in a bit, but if you think it's your job to tell people why they're wrong, let me release you from that burden. I'm going to change the whole culture of the book. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. I know it feels like it's a morally righteous requirement, but it doesn't actually help. People, I'm so nerdy about this stuff, but I would recommend a book at the end for you to go read about this. So I do it on my podcast, The Sacred, all the time. I listen to people from all kinds of beliefs and backgrounds, all kinds of perspectives in the world, and I ask them, what is sacred to you? And tell me about your childhood, and what do you believe, and why? And what were you thinking in this moment? And what about that interests you? And what makes you fired up? And what are you scared of? And what makes you angry? Like, deep conversation with someone lowers everyone's threat reaction and means you can actually encounter people face to face. And honestly, like, without having to do much, then, very often, the question is, well, tell me about the same for you. And then I get to talk about Jesus, and I have earned the right. Because they know I'm not going to attack them, they know I'm not going to try and change them. I'm actually interested in them as they are. And people, at least in my generation, and the people that I'm with, and in the UK, but it's happened on buses and planes, and in random places in the US since I've been here, everyone is hungry for meaning, everyone is hungry for wisdom, everyone is hungry for community, everyone is hungry for depth. Underneath the defences, there is the tender longings of the human soul. And if you have a congregation that has got anything to offer for those longings, then offer it and they will be blessed by it. They just need to know that you don't hate them and you're not out to stick a flag in them.
Amen. Okay, I want to go back to, which I'm grateful that you helped us by defining sin, since we are talking about sin. And I want to go back to something that we at Second Pres were talking about this morning in one of the Sunday school classes about sin. And I think we were getting caught up in the difference between what your world is like, literally in London versus America. You pointed out we love boxes to put people in triangulation and all of that. And we were looking particularly at page 29 where you are talking about the sinless society which promised liberation from the psychological harm that externally imposed guilt has begun to feel a bit suffocating. No one is really responsible for anything, but therefore neither can anyone really be forgiven. We were stuck on this sinless society idea and would love for you to make us smarter about it and help us understand that. And I think I do wonder if there are literal cultural differences based on the fact of America versus Britain and whatnot, but I just wanted to ask that, particularly because going back and looking at, you started that discussion, I'm going to not say her last name, but Catherine, who is known as the Britain's strictest headmistress and head teacher, she says that though she is not a Christian, she believes in something close to what is original sin, which in my opinion makes you see that something is immediately broken with that person and needs to be fixed, as opposed to that person is worthy of love.
Okay, I'm not going to try and make you smarter about this, because I think, honestly, like, it took a long time to get the courage to write a book about sin when I'm not a theologian. Like, it feels like each part of the church has so much depth of reflection on what we mean by this, and they often come to slightly different conclusions. So now I'm aware that whatever I say now, some of you will be like, no. And that's all right, actually, I can totally handle that, because what I'm trying to do is offer this concept into a culture that thinks it doesn't need it,
Right.
as a provocation, right? I'm just trying to like drop a pebble and see what happens, rather than go, like, this is my worked out theory doctrinally. So I think you're right, that because we were further ahead on secularization, in the UK, up until recently, what was left of the church was the Church of England, which I am part of and has beautiful strengths and weaknesses like all human institutions. But let's just say most of the visible church in the UK was the opposite of hellfire and brimstone. Right? The people who grew up in churches for whom the idea that you could call someone else a sinner was normal, it's just like not part of our, I'm not sure it's ever been frankly part of our cultural DNA. would be really bad manners. And the long withdrawing roar of secularization just meant there was just very little theological literacy in the culture. And so, but what we had is this kind of, and there's some good bits of this, but this kind of default liberal cultural capture that is very, in the Jonathan Haidt kind of cultural taste wise, it's very, very resistant to judgment, right? If we're all free individuals, the worst thing you can do to someone is judge them. And that was very, very dominant in the UK. Okay. It was a strong social sin to really have any opinions on anyone else's sex life, monetary choices, moral choices. It was very much like live and let live. And if people mess up, they mess up, but probably, they're carrying some trauma, and that's, just live and let live. And again, there's some really good things about that, to have some grace and compassion towards other people's stories, and to not be someone who thinks that you are able to stand on high and cast judgment on them. There's some really healthy parts of that cultural shift. But the reason I'm interested in sin and forgiveness as two concepts that hold together is they say something true about humans. I think that we have a propensity to mess things up and then give us something to do with it. And if you have a fully relativist, you just figure it out, what's right for you is right for you and what's wrong for me is wrong for me. But then someone messes up, they're just cast into the outer darkness, right? It becomes, we somehow externalize that binary into good people and bad people. We're not prepared to go, we are all, the problem of the heart, the human problem runs through the human heart. When you lose at least that theological anthropology that sin, or whatever the language you can tolerate is something we are all individually and collectively dealing with. It is all our problem, but we also can all find help with it. This idea that humans are redeemable, that we can change. You accidentally get to, well, of course there's good people and bad people. And usually those go along the lines of whatever my particular tribe is. So I'm not answering this very coherently, but it felt like the desire not to be judgy of other people up to a point meant that we actually ended up with a very graceless situation, sort of counterintuitively.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, you moved us into the chapter on pride, which you talked about the PLMs, people like me, and the NLMs, the not like me's. And I want to get into the Sacred podcast, which I think is fantastic, and also something you said a couple of weeks ago when we were on a Zoom call, that you see great value in friendship and asking somebody what is sacred about them. It's a completely... listening to your podcast, it deflates people in a way that you're like, whoa, that's an incredible question. So, a question to you is, as you built the sacred, are there people that you have been like, that is a not like me, very clearly person in that category, and they have completely shocked you, or they've completely confirmed for you? Or, how do you describe them as PLMs versus NLMs? And how do they kind of shift out of those for you as you think about the pride, and also as you think about the ways in which you just said people can actually change?
So like we're saying, for those who haven't written the book, people like me syndrome is my shorthand, and this comes from a guy called John Yates, for what scientists call homophily. And homophily just means love of the same. And it is this incredibly well-evidenced tendency to humans to prefer people that remind us of ourselves. And this, obviously, we kind of can see, we see socially how this works out in things like racism, but the slightly embarrassing, ridiculous thing about humans is it shows up in all kinds of ridiculous other ways as well. Like door-to-door salespeople were more likely to make a sale if they shared a physical characteristic with the person they're trying to sell to, but that can be height, right? It can be eye color, it can be like hand size, something ridiculous like that. And I was like, oh, that's stupid. Like, why would you buy something from someone just because they're the same height as you? And then I started paying attention to it myself. I was like, yeah. Like, I sort of walked down the train the other day, and someone was using the same fancy journal brand that I like, and the same type of pen. And I swear to you, this is the thought that went through my head was, this is like a good person. Right? If you go abroad and you meet someone who is from your hometown, how do you feel towards them? Yeah? Do you like everyone in your hometown? Are they all good people? No, they are not. That is homophily, right? If someone's wearing the same glasses as me, like, I feel more comfortable with tall women initially, so because I feel less like I'm taking up too much space. Same university, like, in some ways it's like a truism to say we like to have things in common with people, but when you start to notice the way your warmth and openness goes up or down, depending if you can find, and it's literally, we are like Narcissus scanning the world for fragments of our own reflection. It's so dumb. It's just like, oh, why are we like this world? But that concept completely broke open this whole sin for me. This sense that in some ways it's fine, like, don't freak out, we all do this, it's in the literature, it's not like the good people don't do this and the bad people do this, we all do this. And sometimes it's fine, like, it's totally fine to hang out with people who like the same music as you, it's okay to love your hometown, it's okay to love your football team, none of that's a problem. It's when you let it tip into a moral judgment and then you naturally withdraw from someone, because that sets up a cycle. And so on the podcast, I interview people of wildly different religious and non-religious beliefs, people on all sides of the very neuralgic issues, like the rights of trans people, or race, or whatever is the thing that we're using as an excuse to hate each other in that particular moment. And I really try and listen to them. And then at the end I reflect out loud for the listener, which is a super risky thing to do. And I'm like, this is what I felt going into this interview, and this is what I felt by the end. For a long time I was like, homophily is something that is driving tribalism and polarization, and even though it's fine in like some context, we need to be super aware of it. And I do think that it can become sin. More recently I've been like, how do we judo move this? How do we go looking for the thing that's going to make us feel comfortable with that person? And so
Notebooks.
But like, so I knew I needed to talk to someone who was a pagan or a witch. Feel the tension?
No, the intrigue.
Yeah, so that's a line for a lot of people. We have so much interesting stuff going on in our editorial team, but I was like, if I am talking to people from all the big tribes and positions going on in the UK, lots of young women are being drawn to astrology, paganism, witchiness, all these things. And I was like, I noticed that happening from a distance, and it's not my vibes. I am not drawn, and that means I probably need to understand it. And so I was like, I need to go and listen curiously to someone who sees the world like this. My mum started praying protection. But my mum became a Christian after me, and now she's like a delightful prayer warrior woman. She's like, I cover you with the blood of Jesus. And it's like, seriously, that's, I'll take it. And I tried to find some interviewees to talk to, and I was like, you're too MLM, I can't do it. Like, I can't get myself to the place where I can listen. And if you're in this room and you are witchy, like, notice what's happening in your body. Right? If this is you, and I've just admitted that I found that group of people MLM not like me, if I've admitted that group of people trigger me into a little bit of a threat reaction, you will also have one in your body who will be like, oh, she seemed nice, but no. Right? That relational distance, we move away from each other. That's what happens when we receive the message, however subtle, from someone that they are not warm to us, or they don't like us, or they disagree with us, or they don't respect us, or our tribe, or our group. Fight or flight kicks in, and we withdraw. And that happens to me all the time with guests. And what I've learned is to notice it, and it's what I think Jesus meant when he said, one of the things Jesus meant when he said, when someone hits you in the face, turn the other cheek. Because the reaction we get to that little bit of threat reaction when we encounter someone different from us, or who disagrees with us, or who we think doesn't like us, who is not the narcissist mirror reflecting us back at ourselves, we can either go on the attack, which you see happening all the time, get snippy, or dismissive, whatever it is, eye-rolling, or we can, which is fight, or we can withdraw and go into flight and just be like, no, they're not for me, I'm going to go back into my tribe, I'm going to go back into my bubble. And what turn the other cheek means is we stay. It means we ask for the next question. We steady ourselves, and we're like, it's possible this reaction in me is not entirely reliable about this person. And, sorry, this is a long answer, but so with this particular group of people who I was feeling a bit fight or flighty about, I was like, I have to find someone who I can get to that place of like steadiness, who I can turn the other cheek with, who I can ask good questions with, who I can treat with respect, frankly, and not be in that whole interview eye-rolling and waiting to tell them why they're wrong, because as we have discussed, that is pointless. And so I saw a woman in the newspaper who was dating Andrew Garfield, who is a witch, and she had on this incredibly cool, colourful suit, and she was about 5'11" and brunette. And I went, that's my witch. That is my witch. Because she's sufficient. I know you're going to maybe think I'm crazy, but please pay attention to this, because I think it's true of all of us. She was sufficiently reminding me of myself. I love a colourful suit. That I thought, that's the bridge. We have just enough in common that I can listen to you and seek to understand you. And so there were points in that interview where I was like, but I was able to stay in a genuine, open, honest conversation of encounter. And she was like, I can't tell you how healing this is to have a Christian listen to me and not attack me. And there was all this history for her, which is her story that I won't tell you, but something important happened in that moment. And so that kind of stuff, I'm just learning to be very intentional about, and it gets you to all kinds of fascinating places.
Thank you again for sharing that. Okay, I have my question, because I think we're getting close to opening it up to the, I want to say congregation, because I'm pastor. It's like out of my boxes. The question we talked about, and that is, beyond folks listening to and subscribing to The Sacred, which is Elizabeth's podcast, one of the things that I was thinking about and wanted to ask you this question that I prepared you for was the way in which we got connected to Nate, to Cal's, to Reagan and Hannah at Christ was through sharing resources of other people who are thinking in similar ways, or maybe not thinking in similar ways, but make us think and reconsider our own faith, our own lives, want us to live fully alive, and move towards that deeper purpose and that deeper meaning we're all in for. So, will you share for the audience / congregation 3 people and or podcasts or movies or whatnot that you think we should check out that have been enlightening or gifts to you for that?
Yes, so the first one is a Substack, which is a kind of email newsletter service, if you've not discovered it, called Streams in the Desert. And it is by a woman who is a spiritual director called Julie Dunstan. And it's just, if you are a Christian or you're interested and you think you might want to dip your toe into the kind of resources of that tradition, she's just wise and kind and thoughtful, and it's a little bit of like space for prayer, and then she always has an amazing poem, and it's my best source for new beautiful poems. And she has almost no audience because she's got almost no ego, but I would really recommend her. And then I'm going to recommend 2 people from 2 polar opposite tribes, neither of which actually are my tribe. And the first one is a woman called Sarah Steiner-Lebrano, Dr. Sarah Steiner-Lebrano, who published a book called Don't Talk About Politics and What to Do Instead. And she's the person that really gave me the theory under the intuition that debate is not at all helpful, that trying to scold or even really challenge someone into changing their views is pointless. She does the real deep dive. It was her Oxford thesis on concepts like reactance, which is this basically the walls we put up when we can sense someone's trying to change our mind, and the way identity works and belonging works. And I wrote a subtext about a year before it came out called "Friendship is my theory of change," and it's basically that's the argument. The only people really capable of changing our minds is our friends. The other person is a guy called Rod Dreher, that some of you might have heard of. I was just on a panel discussion with him in Chicago, and he is the photo negative of Sarah. He's used to write a column called Crunchy Conservatives. He wrote the Benedict option. He's good friends with Jay Vance. He moved to Hungary to be friends with Viktor Orban, maybe? Unclear. And I disagree with him on many, many things. And he's an amazing writer, and he is thinking aloud on the page, and he is capable of changing his mind. And the confusing thing for me about Rod is how much we have in common, and how influenced we are by the same sources. I read his book after my book, and it's called Lost in Wonder, and I'd say a third to a half of the footnotes are similar. Right? He reads the same poetry as me, into Martin Buber, like he is deep in some of the same sources as me, and has come to really very different conclusions to me on some things that I care deeply about. And we had I think a actually respectful on-stage conversation when I was in Chicago, which would be online somewhere eventually. But what he does is he forces me to keep my heart open to the possibility that there are people. He's the opposite of reinforcing my people like me syndrome. He challenges me. He challenges me to understand why people come to so radically different conclusions. And that's what I'm trying to do on the sacred all the time. And for whatever reason, I can read his perspective in ways that I might not be for others. And there's lots of people, lots of Marxists I can't read either. There's lots of Marxists I find really annoying. And Sarah's great and smart and thoughtful. So those are my slightly cat amongst the pigeon suggestions.
Are there questions from the audience/congregation? I'm just going to use the language.
Can you share a little more about the community you live in?
Yeah. So I always feel worried that we're overclaiming for it, because in some ways it's only a few clicks over from normal. So I'm married to a lovely man, and we have 2 children. And we live in what is basically just a family home in London with another married couple and then another single person. And we are inspired by kind of monastic rhythms and ways of being together. I used to call us a micro-monastery, but that's also an overclaim. But we have turned the garage into a chapel, and we pray morning prayer, and we pray compline, and we put most of our money into a joint account and then divvy up the chores, and one person cooks every evening and we eat together. And we have a kind of monastic-inspired rule of life where and that's kind of what I mean by the trellis. We've got who do we want to be becoming together? Where do we need to be putting our time and attention in order to do so? So we value prayer, we have prayer rituals. We value hospitality, we have regular time for hospitality. We value celebration, so we have structured rituals for celebration. We value creativity, so time for creativity, and we've set up our time, our collective time, in order to be trying to grow in that direction. The fact that it's monastic inspired means it is incredibly non-utopian and non-rosy tinted. I am a huge advocate of intentional community and incredibly aware of how badly they can go wrong if you are not pretty hard-headed about it. We did a lot of prep, we had a lot of hard conversations, they all have high emotional intelligence, and the truth of the human heart is that humans are really annoying. And when you live up close to them, you realise, maybe I'm annoying too. And so there's a lot of friction, right? But what a good structure and a rule of life and a shared vision and values can do is make that friction about polishing each other rather than wounding each other. And like the rule of St. Benedict is a wonderful, like, the headline of the Order of Benedict is people are annoying in 19th century Latin. You know, monks and nuns are not 60s hippies, right? They don't think if we all move in together everything will be lovely. They think if we move in together everything will be hard, but in the hardness we will grow. And it's also an incredible joy. I really, really love it. And I would caution people against jumping in without some serious prep.
I have a question. You have children. I don't know how old. These sins look different. So, for example, like gluttony, numbing, for previous generations, it might have looked like, you know, alcoholism. But for younger generations, it looks like 18 hours a day on Instagram. Or like the separation, for us, it looks like, you know, you were talking to ChatGPT in a way you've never talked to your mom. How do you talk about this wisdom to your children, translating it with, because it's changing, it's morphing what these look like. Are you ever worried that you might not notice? Because when I got on Facebook, my mom had no idea. I was just talking to strangers. I was really young. She had no clue. She was busy doing other, you know, things. Are you ever concerned that you might not notice them slipping into some of these sins is what they are? It's all the same sins, it's just shape-shifting, it's changing because of the new technologies and the new world. So do you have those fears, and how do you talk to them about it?
Thank you. Yeah, I am. They're just coming out of the elementary school years, we call it primary school. Basically, up until now, we have had, just because of their age, have quite high control, right, over what they see, what they watch. We've been on the stricter end of things in terms of they haven't had a phone, they don't have access to iPads. Like, we've been quite, let's try and restrict the flow of information and these stories. There's a guy called Andy Crouch who wrote a book called The Tech-Wise Family that we found very, very useful quite early on. And he's like, you don't be Amish, but maybe like Amish adjacent. And he's super challenging, and we've definitely not managed to be as rigorous as they have, but it gave us enough of a reasoning and a framework for the things that easily slip, like family meals, like being quite strict about phones, like the importance of books, like talking on long car journeys, like special time with each kid where we're really asking them how they're doing. All these, I'm sure all of you are just doing these naturally. I had to be told to do these things. And so we're trying to narrate the world as we go, and they are watching us trying to live a life of faith up close with other people in a local church. That I guess I hope means there's some osmosis thing happening, but honestly, I'm aware that it's about to do this. Like, the moment that they're going much further away for school, they're much busier, they're traveling to see their friends, the things that they're exposed to in their friends' houses really change, and I can feel that, like, the desire to be more authoritarian than comes naturally, or we've been thus far, and we will be like that with phones. And actually, the smartphone-free movement in the UK has really taken off, and it's helpful because there's now a critical mass, so we won't be such weirdos. And I'm grateful for that, because even 2 or 3 years ago it would have been much, much harder, and I know a lot of you will have parented through this where it didn't feel like there was any choices. But honestly, my hope is, frankly, I think we're getting almost to the age where we've done everything we can do. Like, we've either formed their character through the way we've tried to be with them and the way we've tried to model to live, that they are equipped to make choices or they're not. And if I try and hold on to tight control, I'm going to push them away. If I walk alongside and do the asking questions and listening thing, really listen, don't try and scold, really listen, seek to understand, share what I can, maintain the bond of closeness so that I'm someone that they trust and can talk to. My hunch is we're probably getting towards the end of it, that's all I can do. And also refuse to pay for a phone.
Got one here.
First of all, thanks to Christ Church, Second Pres, and CALS for doing this. It's collaborations like this will make our community even stronger. But for Elizabeth, when you were atheist or agnostic, you said you missed God. What did you miss most about God?
I can't quite see where you are, so.
Over here.
Hi. What's your name?
Dale.
Dale. Sorry, I forgot to ask your name. I meant to know present you. So the answer is God. Yeah, I don't. The words fall apart. I feel extraordinarily grateful that when I was a teenager, and again now, I felt presence of love, and yeah, I'm not gonna try. What I missed was I missed the love of God. I missed knowing I was seen and held and beloved despite, not because of anything I've done. I was like, yeah, I don't know how you live without it, honestly.
I have a question. It sort of piggybacks on Dale's question, and that is, I read your book, and which I found very interesting. I've listened to you speak, but it's not clear to me how you lost your faith. I understand how you regained your faith, but how did you lose your faith?
Thank you. What's your name?
I'm John.
Wait, what's happening?
I'm right back here.
So not only is my eyesight quite bad, but these glasses make these lights turn into fractal hallucinogenic patterns.
Stand up, John.
I want to see your face. So I think I became Christian in this very emotional way. Is that God? Maybe not. Oh, hi. And then I am the quite emotional person, and so I was in this sort of Pentecostal charismatic place. I don't feel like I needed to understand the concepts. This might be very difficult. I wasn't in doctrinal churches. I was in churches where you dance and sing and put your hands in the air. God is love and God is lovely, and we're all lovely. And but I was also, as well as being emotional, I'm also a nerd girl. I don't know if you've noticed. And I'm quite academic, and I like to understand ideas, and I was going to university, and then I was making big serious programs for the BBC, and those were in two completely separate boxes in my life. There's churches where I find love, ideas are over here, and then I went to work for the BBC on a program about the Bible, and the two things crashed together like the Large Hadron Collider, and it was really messy because we were making a drama about the Bible, dramatization of the Bible, and they said it was all Oxford and Cambridge theology graduates, and they had all, if they had any faith when they went to Oxford or Cambridge to do theology, they'd lost it because that's often what happens. Okay, now I am looking in the right direction.
Your book, Fully Alive, and Tending to the Soul in Turbulent Times, and listening to you talk today, it's really encouraged me to look more into your book and what you're saying about how to tend to our souls in turbulent times. comment, if you will, on another approach that people are taking through the production of The Chosen. How would you see that in terms of tending to the soul in turbulent times? Do you have any comments on that?
The TV series.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful retelling that's really connecting with people. I don't have much else to say, really, that I'm glad it exists. I think people are really longing for stories and they're longing for wisdom. And, it was talked about on the Rest of Entertainment podcast in the UK, which is like the big culture commentary mainstream podcast, where I would never have expected a Bible dramatization to ever find its way, and it found its way there. And they were saying that this is really interesting and people should go watch it, and it really does connect into that thing that's happening in the UK, where I think we hit the bottom of the curve and are on the way back up. Like there's such a spiritual openness and interest in church again that's being borne out in the data, and things like The Chosen is really helpful for people finding their way in.
One more question. Don't finish this up. Nope. Well, 2 questions.
2 more.
The mic is power.
Thank you for being here, and this has been so. I'm scared to ask because I'm emotional too.
We could be a week.
Can I ask this without crying? So there's so many things I just wish I could sit down and ask you, but I think we live in this time that feels so overwhelming, and right now, as I hear you talk, I feel so hopeful, and I've read your book, but I'm like, I'm going to read it again. And would you ever be willing to write a book about hope and how to raise our kids in these times? And I don't even know, I guess I'm a big daily practice kind of person, so maybe that's a specific question, like where do we start in a daily practice to have hope in these times? Because I think you offer that, and I think I need that, and I know a lot of the people I live with do. So,
What's your name?
Emily.
Emily, thank you. Yeah, so I wrote the book because I really felt the need of it. There were periods where I was just like full of black despair. About climate change, that was a big one for me. That you could, pick your poison. And so this is where I hope the book is really helpful wherever you land metaphysically. I think what Christianity, because it's an apocalyptic religion, can do is help us. The New Testament is a bunch of letters between people who thought they were living at the end of the world. What does it mean to grow in faith and hope and love and joy and gentleness and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and self-control when the world is burning, right? That is a key theme in the text. And I never spotted it. There was an atheist friend of mine. I said, how do you deal with the despair? How do you deal with the fear? And she said, well, I try and think, if it is the end of the world, what kind of people do we need to be becoming? And that question somehow liberated me, because it made me go, where is my hope? And I think my hope has been in prosperity and democratic stability and livable climate. And those are unstable places to put hope, and I don't think the Bible ever promised. There's no promise in my faith that everything will be nice or fine, right? That we will have a nice little prosperous middle class life. The promise is, in this world you will have trouble, but I have overcome the world. The promise is, love is stronger than death. And so, it's those twin things, almost, and this is a recovery movement thing that's helped, it's almost acceptance of how terrible things are. And when I'm like clenched against it, when I'm like, I can't believe it, how is this happening? Like, clenching doesn't help. Sometimes I have to go, yeah, things are falling apart, that's really sad, and I have to grieve it. And also, people have lived through ends of the world before. Christians have lived through plague, the fall of Rome and the fall of Jerusalem, and a lot of them did what I'm tempted to do, which is panic and attack my enemies. And then some of them put their roots down deep and loved their enemies and looked after other people's sick and cared for their neighbours and modelled what it might look like if your hope is in something else other than this life. And so, and frankly, there's loads of days where I don't believe it, right? My faith is like a mustard seed, but I keep choosing to go, what if love is stronger than death? What if it can all burn? And that not be the end of the story? Like, what if every tear will be wiped away from every eye? Sorry. See it, Lee? What does it look like to believe that like, no peace, no justice now, but justice will roll down like a river? Like, how would I act differently if I believed that? Yeah, so that's sort of what I hold on to.
Thank you. We have one last.
Yeah, I'm Frank, and I just have a question for you. How has your view of Scripture changed? I grew up in that it's infallible, inerrant. You went through this crisis. Has your view changed on the Bible?
Yeah. Oh, I hated that book for a while then. And then I was like, when I was on my way back in, I was like, right, fine. Should probably read the same. And now I love it. I'm like fully back in love with the Bible. It is alive. Wow. Oh my goodness. So much going on there. And I think what happened is I relaxed into it being polyphonic. It's this, like, I do believe in the big story of the Bible, right? I do believe there is a thread running through it, like home away, home again. I do believe that, like, the deep logic of the love of God that comes and gets us through everything and brings us home. It's not that I think it's like a random collection, but it also looks like a random collection, right? Different voices, different genres, different cultures. And crucially, I think the thing that really helped me, particularly reading the New Testament, is like radically different personalities writing this thing. You've got like John the mystic, John the inclusive mystic, who's like drawing people in, super comfortable with mystery. Then you've got Paul, who's like delightfully grumpy and was trained as a Pharisee and is like slowly in recovery from being a Pharisee and has good days and bad days. Like, they've both met Jesus, and so you get these different threads, right? People talk about there's John Piper. I'll be honest, I don't quote John Piper that often. But John Piper said there was like a radically liberalizing impulse in the Bible. And that is like opening up of a new world. Freedom, it's for freedom I've set you free. And there is a radically conservative impulse in the Bible, which is to like steward your inheritance. Take care to take what you have been given and pass it on, right? They're both in there. It's about freedom and it's about order. It's about, like, there's this constant negotiation. And I think, and different denominations really like different bits, right? Sorry to be really wrong, different Enneagram numbers really like different bits. I do think if you did like a big 5 psychological traits profile mapping of denominations, you'd get something really funny, because we all think we're just like seeking the truth, or actually it's all about basically charismatic because I'm an extrovert who likes intense experiences. So yeah, I think what I did was go, I'm just going to let it be messy. I'm going to let it be wild. Like, let it be really confusing. Let it be really annoying. Let it be really beautiful. And just like, I'm going to be in conversation with this thing because this is one of the ways that God's in conversation with me. I don't love it all, I don't understand it all, but I'm going to trust that there's always something nourishing for me in there.
Okay, as a way of saying thank you to you, I hope you looking out and seeing all these people, you can take the glasses off to actually see them since they've never no work. You write, I want to be the kind of person that is needed at the end of the world. If we're headed into even more turbulent times, I want to be someone who is of use, not overwhelmed and panicky, but steady and hopeful, able to contribute a weaving of canopy of trust under which other people can shelter. These folks, on behalf of these folks, you are that. So thank you for being there.